G'day legends, I hope you're all awesome. On today's video, I want to directly address a question that popped up on one of my recent Q&A video sessions about double and triple tracking guitar solos. The question essentially went along the lines of double and triple tracking. Is that something I've done in recordings? And if so, how do I go about approaching it? So the first part of that question, it's something I have experimented with, being a fan of players like Randy Rhoads and Brian May and Zach Wild, a bunch of players who have spoken about their almost kind of orchestral inspired approach to playing guitar solos. Most of the time when I've had to record a guitar solo, the kind of vibe has been play a bunch of takes until you play something that really kind of sounds a bit special or inspired. Try to push yourself right to that threshold where your playing almost starts to fall apart. It almost sounds like you're not going to nail it. But then when you nail it, it comes across as sounding really, really special. A good example of this would be on the Ragdoll song Self-Censored, one of my personal favorite solos that I've ever played. I was in this room tracking with friend of the channel, Mr. Troy Nababan. Check out our gear podcast as well, called The Gear Podcast, as an aside. And I had a bunch of attempts at this solo, and Troy said, you know what I want you to do? Go and run around the block. It had just started raining. Run as fast as you can. I'm going to tune up the guitar. When you walk in, the solo is going to be queued up and ready to go. Grab the guitar and just do it. So I did that, ran around the block feeling like an absolute fool, getting a bit wet, sprinted into the room, picked up the guitar, and I managed to play the solo that made it to the recording, which is, I don't know, kind of special in my opinion. It's a moment in time that was captured, but there's other solos that I've done that are maybe a little more worked out, where kind of a more compositional approach, or that like orchestral inspired approach, has really worked. One of them being the Ragdoll song Rust. In the solo, it's not double tracked, but there's a bunch of these selective harmonies in there. So I thought it might be fun to revisit that solo, and I'll do a single take and then we'll compare it to a doubled take. So I'll do the single take first. Thank God for reamping as well. It made it so much easier to do this video. Then you're going to hear a straight up double at around the same volume, and then you're going to hear a double where the original take and the double take are panned about 35-40% left and right respectively. Let's have a listen to that in context. Now, there is a bunch of delay and reverb and just general grease on that track to make it sit in the mix, but you can hear a difference in there. The double take does provide that kind of natural chorusing effect, and like a mono versus a stereo chorus, as soon as you kind of go to stereo, it sounds a little wider and a little more interesting. So the take where I kind of pan them sounds probably the most compelling to me. Another approach that I heard about recently was one that I picked up from an interview with Per Nilsson, I think on Coffee with Ola England, where basically Per talks about having a phaser on their solos. And then Ola mentions, you do a take and then you do two more takes panned hard left and right with the phaser. And it makes it sound really interesting because the phasers probably aren't going to be in sync. I think Per was just using a phase 90 in front of an Axe effects. So you're going to get this wonderful spatial effect. Everything is going to be a little more randomized, more interesting. Again, the point with the guitar solo being you really want to capture someone's attention for the duration of the solo, and whether it is the note choice or the phrasing or the technique you're using, or in this case, kind of the tone and the spatial element, I think it's pretty cool. So we will hear the single take and then this kind of triple tracked phaser take. definitely interesting. I think that's something I'm going to have to try on a recording at some point. I really like that. I'm sure you'd be able to replicate that in something like the Axe FX with a dual phaser, dual amp setup. Might have to do a video with that one at some point in the future. But on the actual recording, and what we ended up going for with Rust was a single take with what I'd refer to as some selective harmonies in there. So particular licks that we either reinforced with a double or an octave down or a diatonic harmony of some variety. So again, I'll play you the single take, then I'll play this kind of selective harmony thing where I start off by playing diatonic thirds, and it's got this Phrygian dominant feel, so it reminds me of Yngwie, which I definitely enjoy. Then there's some octave down lines. Then right at the end, it kind of goes from a thirds harmony to an octave down, back to a thirds harmony. But also, I've left some parts that aren't doubled or harmonized in there. So I played the selective harmonies on my PRS mirror, and you'll be able to see and hear the difference as these parts come in. Let's have a listen. So I like that a lot better than a straight harmony or a straight octave down or a double, simply because kind of highlights particular phrases in there that maybe have some interesting note choices or are an interesting phrase, and it reinforces the kind of widdly, speedy parts in there, and it just kind of sounds impressive as well. Again, just trying to make the solo almost like a song within a song. That was really fun to do on the original recording, and it was really fun to try and recreate it there. What I want to try and do is see how close to that vibe, having kind of the stereo width in there, having some interesting texture from those selective harmonies I can get with just a single take. So I've added a stereo chorus. This is kind of like an emulation of the TC2290 setup as a chorus that I've got in my Axe FX. As you can hear by my cat's cries, it's his favorite take on there as well. There's a phase reverse on the right channel, so it sounds extra wide, some pitch detune, there's some delay, and there's a very subtle octave down effect on it as well. Let's hear that. At the end of the day, I think all of these approaches work really, really well. It's all about having different tools in the toolkit when you're recording, in my opinion, and anything that you can do to make a guitar solo just kind of work a little better in the song, maybe sound a little more special or capture the listener's attention is going to be effective, whether you're doing it with effects, whether you're kind of doing it the old school manual way of doubling, tripling, harmonizing your solos. In general, I think it's just a great exercise to try and play something and then recreate it as closely as you can as well. Of course, you're going to have those guitar solos which just happen in the moment and you can almost never recreate the vibe again. That's part of the magic of recording as well, and why I love that process so much. Let me know your thoughts. Have you tried double or triple tracking solos on your recordings? And out of all the takes that you heard on today's video, which one was your favorite? I'll leave you with the actual final recording of the song Rust. I'll just play the guitar solo section so that you get an idea of what it sounds like in a proper mix. Big thank you to friend of the channel, Mr. Troy Nababan, for providing the backing track and for doing all the mixing and producing on Rust, and to Cam Barrett and Ryan Rafferty for bringing their bass, vocal, and drum skills to this one. If you like that stuff, the Ragdoll discography is linked in the video description, along with my Patreon and some fun free stuff that you can get. Have a great day, keep it greasy, and I'll see you next time. want to hear that solo again, do you? What do you reckon, buddy? No? Definitely not.